Peace, everyone. How you doing? Welcome to Black Intelligentsia, where we do interviews and make video and whatever we can to help out the quote unquote blacks in America, worldwide. Right? Y'all see what's going on here. So without further ado, I want to get a mic to my brother and let him present who he is in America. And we just worldwide.
Is it on me now, bro? Shalom, shalom, Carl. Let me begin with a word of prayer. Abba Yah, I am truly humbled and grateful for this opportunity and this invitation. You are the omnipotent one. You are the omniscient one, the self-existent one. And so rather than just say praises to you, I want to say that you have done great things. You are moving in our midst. You have heard our cries and have come down to deliver us. And for that, I'm thankful. I'm humbled. The opportunity to serve at this day and in this season of our deliverance. And so I ask that everything that I would say would be according to the counsel of your will. Hallelujah. Let your spirit guide me into that which needs to be said and keep me from saying that which would be in any way damaging to your people. And so we praise you, we glorify and magnify you. And I ask this in the name, meaning in the character and nature and authority of the man known as Jesus, Yeshua, Yahusha, Yahoshua, Yahushua, Yahweh Shai, the Messiah, and as far as I'm concerned, the champion of the ages. Now, brethren, I would, well, let me just begin by introducing myself. My name is Yashah bin Yeshua Yisrael. I consider myself to be a servant, first and foremost, of the Most High, and I am, based upon the way I was called to this, a malak or an ambassador of Yehoshua or of the Messiah, Christ. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, and I am the founder of a non 501c3. This is really important, unincorporated association of Israelites based in the high desert of Southern California, in a city called Victorville. And this is the name of it is the Church at Victorville. And the reason I use the word church, I understand it's Greek origins, and I don't want to create controversy, but we're dealing with Greco-Romans. And so I chose to use that language because it conveys a broader sense of inclusion in so-called Black America. And as far as I'm concerned, our mission is to bring the house of Yehuda into a higher understanding. And so to reject that term struck me as a strategic mistake. And so I take the opposition from my Hebrew aware brethren who take issue with that word. That's just something we have to agree to disagree on. But at any rate, right now we have an auxiliary organization that we call the Kingdom of Yisrael Community Network. And so our mission is to nation build. As a matter of fact, let me just, well, no, before I do that, let me give a word of testimony. That's what I need to do so people can kind of know who is saying this. You know, in my late teens and my 20s, I worked in the music industry. And I learned by that experience the futility of fame and fortune being something that could fulfill the longing in my heart. A company called Silver Spoon Productions, and we, under the great Leon Silvers III, we uh, gave LA and Babyface their beginning at Solar Records, for example. I mean, we were at the heart of that business, and everybody you can name, and I don't like to drop names, I worked with. I mean, I played on all kind of people's albums, and produced people and wrote songs and toured with the Silvers, a rival to the Jacksons, way back. And I learned firsthand the frustration that was really there, and the glamour wore off. And so as I began to proceed, I started looking elsewhere because I understood that there was still something empty. So I knew it wasn't fame and fortune. A lot of people, continually pursue their dreams looking for that fulfillment, and they never get there, and so they remain frustrated. Fortunately for me, I discovered through that process of being in that business and rubbing shoulders with all these, uppity ups, and I'm talking about, man, like the cat that drew up my, or the man that drew up my contracts was an attorney named John Branca. This man is Michael Jackson's attorney and is over his estate right now. I mean, so I was at every level in the belly of the beast, and yet I wouldn't compromise. And so when it got to that, we want creative control. I was offered a record deal with a Motown distributed label, and we had a meeting in Hollywood, and we're sitting around dinner, and they, well, at the last minute, well, we have to have creative control. I'm like, oh, is that right? I guess they could tell by the look on my face that I'm like, creative control. Nah, I'm bearing witness to the Most High. I ain't gonna create. And then they said, "Oh, is this a deal breaker?" And I said, "Yes." And they turned white as a sheet. I got up and walked out, and I've been running ever since. So I don't want to say I overcame that industry, but I certainly was able to come out of that unscathed with my soul intact and not engaging in homosexuality and any other foolishness, mad, Illuminati rituals or whatever it is that many people were doing to secure fame and fortune. And I came away with a sense that I was on a mission because I knew that the fulfillment and my sense of who am I and what am I doing, what was my authority? Why is my people like under the boot of somebody else? I'm a man. I mean, what is this? I'm black, I'm inferior. What this is? And even as I looked at the civil rights movement as a child, I thought it was absurd. I mean, going into a restaurant where I'm unwanted and seeing it as a victory if I can use financial economic leverage to force them to give me a sandwich is preposterous. With all due respect to Dr. King, and I think he was killed because of his dream, because he woke up. He started saying, wait a minute, I'm leading my people into a burning building. And so I was on a mission that was, unbeknownst to me, really, it was black nationalist. It was post fame and fortune. And so at that point, man, I lost my, because I was doing well in every way. I had popularity, I had the clothes and the fly sports cars, driving a 280Z. And at that time, that was like, you were riding well, and that thing, and had a nice apartment and just money and jewelry and the whole nine. When he came to me originally, the first thing that happened was I started telling people about it and telling them I loved them. My friends left me and said I was gay because I was going around telling them I loved them. My family thought I was nuts. So I lost my family, my friends, my job, my money, my car, my dignity, and basically my will to live. And so just to cut to the chase so we can get to the business at hand, I was in a motel and drinking Tanqueray gin from the bottle like it was water. I mean, I can't say I was suicidal, but I was, I guess, one step away. I never contemplated killing myself, but I was in utter despair over my own sin, the filth that I was involved in, pornography and just wild sin and mad thoughts. And I was helpless to do anything about it. And so that was like a tipping point in my life. And what happened was I got a revelation that I had really never been loved in the way that I understood love to be at some just kind of deep level. And so what I did was I cried out and said, Father, I realized that I've never been loved. And I said, do you love me? And at that moment, man, I was on my face. Somebody came in that room with some invisible oil. That's the only way I can describe it, from another dimension, from heaven, and poured it on me. And it was liquid love. And there are no words on this side of glory to adequately describe what that was. But suffice it to say that I was chosen to know directly the love that he has for us. And I wish I could tell you, brothers, that's why I work so hard and pour my heart out, because I want you to know how much you're loved. I think that's why he did that. At least one reason why he did that. And so anyway, I took that into show business. I made that stand, and then as I began to, I connected with a young writer musician who was 7 years younger than me, named Shabar Ben Yehuda. Well, at that time, that's not his name, but what's his name at that time? But he church, denominational holiness oriented church called Maranatha Community Church in Los Angeles, and they were meeting in a gym. And I had been skeptical because I was raised as a heathen. My father was a loving man. He nurtured me. He took me everywhere where he was proud of me. But I never spent a day in church with my father. And I went to a nursery school in the church with my mother, but it was more of a social gathering than any gospel or any really spirituality going forth. And the hypocrisy of it turned me off, you know. And but at any rate, when I got to this church, I was impressed because it wasn't in a building; it was in a gymnasium, and the people were very casual. And there were some people from show business I had known, a Bo Williams. I think there was like Billy Davis and Marilyn McCoo from a group from way back called the Fifth Dimension. They were there, and so I was comfortable around music industry people. I had Bible studies with some well-known, I don't want to drop them in, well-known artists and that kind of thing during that period too. So, but as I began to, I guess, go through the social channels in that thing, I began to notice what it really was gradually. And so it was the Most High processing me out of that. And just real quickly, I was at what they called a Men for Jesus breakfast. And there were several major pastors of mega churches that were there speaking. And one of them, who will go unnamed for a lot of reasons, was teaching on the relationship between men and women. And he went on to say, well, brothers, we need to submit to our wives as well, because blah, 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 blah. And he was saying things that was, women friendly, so that the tithers, who are mostly women, would be pleased. And at that moment, I was saying, this is Men for Jesus. And we're all gathered in here, and he's going to say that. And the Holy Spirit, man, or the set apart spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh, had me stand up and interrupt him. Now, this was before I knew I was called to ministry. I really wasn't clear on what I was supposed to do. And said, that's not what that says. And I started to explain the passage. And do you know, he changed what he was saying and lined it up according to what I said. And when I left that meeting, I told Shabar, man, we're coming to this church to try to get a blessing for what it is we're doing. This is right before I discovered we were Israel, to get a blessing for what we're doing. And I'm leading them. The assistant pastor had a meeting with us, and I presented the musical vision I had to do. Like, I had a vision of going into secular music and representing the Most High, rather than being a quote unquote gospel artist, to break down the division between the secular and sacred genres. The Song of Solomon is Shir Hasharim in Hebrew, which means the song of songs. So love songs can and should be tools to shift the climate and the atmosphere for kingdom advancement. So I brought that to him, and it was controversial. I said, well, let's pray, my brother. And I started to pray, and the Ruach HaKodesh got thick in that room, and he was like in strange territory. He didn't know what was up. And I'm like, I didn't know what to make of that. But to make a long story short, I finally understood that my calling was above them, because I was looking for their blessings, and I led them in many different ways. A Bible study came out of that, and people were saying, I don't do cocaine anymore. You didn't lay hands on me, but just being around you, I'm off crack instantly, and this and that. Miracles started jumping off. So I said, wait a minute, I have to reassess. So what happened was, in the fall of 1985, I left that congregation, and Shabar and I were roommates, right? He stayed for another year. He was the bass player in that auxiliary. And so it was very difficult. The brethren thought I had fallen away, that Satan had me in this, and nobody understood. So I had to face that. But 6 months later, he started saying, look, you have an apostolic anointing. When I poured that oil on you, it was love, but it was also authority. There's a role, an assignment that you have to play. And I'm like, oh, I dig. But I had to overcome that and have the faith to step away from that before he would speak. And then he spoke. He said that. He started saying, you are the children of Israel. I always knew Christ or so-called Jesus was a black man. I that was just blood memory or something. I never bought into this whole white Jesus thing for whatever reason, and I never really discussed it much. But uh, you know, so he said that. He started saying other things to me, and I brought it to Brother Shabar, and he was like bringing me the Bible and saying, "Man, nah, this is what this is." And I was like, "No." And then he began to go to Esalen bookstore and bring back books by, I think it was a book, Babylon, From Babylon to Timbuktu, because he was a college graduate. He came out of Loyola University with a degree in business administration. So he was a learned man, a scholar. And I saw that and began to discover the world of the what I call the Hebrew Israelite aware, those who are aware, who have made that cultural reconnection to the covenant. But fundamentally, my revelation was direct. And that's where the difficulty for me is, and the challenge in terms of uh, finding my proper place in the kingdom. As many people are skeptical. It's kind of like when Moshe, and I'm no Moshe, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying when Moshe returned from a 40-year absence to lead the children of Israel out of that bondage, if it were not for Aharon, they would have looked upon him with envy and suspicion. They may have just refused to listen to him. I mean, he was raised under Pharaoh. This cat is like, he killed somebody. He's gone for 40 years. And he come back to him. Some Yah told him to set us Ahaya or whatever it was. And so it was the insider, his brother, that was able to allay that concern. And so my brother Shabar is well respected among the Hebrew Israelite community. He's done various conferences and gone about the nation and networked across the spectrum and been received. As a matter of fact, he was anointed with oil by Yashah of the ISUP. It was ICUPK at that time in 95, I guess it was, or around that time. And we had Arayab, which was one of their top men on our cable access program, preparing the way here in town. That was before the internet. And so, he and Yashah, strangely enough, extended his blessing to preparing the way ministries, which is what we were calling what we were doing, and wanted him to hook up with who the let's see, IUIC, I think the brother's name is Nathaniel at that time. And so we have even that legacy. In other words, we have a certain legitimacy in that that stream of thought among Hebrews. And so I'm saying that to say that he is my inside man, as it were, but I'm without. And we really need to promote that, because anytime Yah reformed his people, I mean, from Genesis, Bereshit to maps, to those of us who believe in the primary sources of the first century that is come to be called the New Testament. I mean, we believe, and well, you know what? I need to just cut this short. Really, the bottom line is that the revelation of outsiders being who Yah chooses to bring deliverance is something that I'm pushing, because I want our people to recognize that they're going to have to look beyond their circles and even known circles and expand their willingness to receive that which Yah has. He raises up whomsoever he will. I mean, Cyrus the Persian was referred to by the Most High as my anointed. So let's broaden our scope and not assume that everybody who is Hebrew aware comes from some camp or congregation or organization we're aware of. So having said that, let me just briefly read that statement of what we have on tap in concerning the nation building, really the unique contribution that we're bringing to sovereign nationalism. is what we see as the need, both biblically and practically or scripturally, for a community, a self-contained community in captivity. And so that's fundamentally what our focus is at this time. So let me just read that statement, and then we can just go from there, and you can ask questions because I don't everything in an hour, and so I don't want to overstate anything. But let me just read this brief statement. Let me see if I can call this up. Here it is. It reads like this: the Kingdom of Yisrael Community Network is a non-501c3 Hebrew Israelite nation building platform created to help connect and organize community-minded Hebrew Israelite men and women of the Kingdom of Yehuda. Our mission is to help prepare a new witness to the whole house of Yisrael and the world to declare through cultural unity and divine community that we as a people are indeed the lost found kingdom of Yehuda. The overall goal of KYCN is to contribute to the divine restoration of the United Kingdom of Yisrael. And indeed, we consider it a great honor to be a part of the Hebrew Israelite sovereign nationalist movement. We do believe that what KYCN brings to the nation building process represents the missing piece of the sovereign nationalist puzzle. Now, in grateful acknowledgement, and we are grateful, of the historic and landmark accomplishments of the late H.E. Ben-Ami, may he rest in completeness, and our Hebrew Israelite family in the land of our fathers, the KYCN Leadership Council Executive Committee is hereby issuing the following declaration to our fellow Yehudaite nationals worldwide. In this new season, just as in every ancient captivity, we as set apart nationals must establish a self-sustaining Hebrew Israelite community in this final captivity in America. The KYCN Council, along with our network supporters and affiliates, sincerely believe that building a Hebrew Israelite government in the wilderness of America is the necessary and proper next step that we as the lost found kingdom of Yehuda must take in divine preparation for the long-awaited reconciliation of Yehuda and Yisrael and the coming mass exodus to the land of our fathers, as it is written. Hallelujah. And so this is essentially a statement of what it is we're about to do. And I guess with that, I would turn it back over to you, Brother Carl, to ask questions. I know I've said a lot, and or just express what you feel and what you're doing, which is obviously very critical to the overall form of this nation. Please.
Okay, I would like to ask because, and you can mute while I'm talking, and we'll just mute because of the echo.
Okay, what do I need to just mute the sound on my?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if you go up top, you just hit the microphone and it'll mute you.
Is this good?
Yeah, you're not muted if you do that.
Oh, okay. I don't know. Wait, go on the. Oh, I dig. Turn camera on. Mute.
Right, there you go. So I coined a phrase based off of Malcolm X, Black nationalism, and as she said, when you was coming into things, it was somewhat based in Black nationalism. So I took black out, which is a byword that's used for the children of Israel, Egypt, Egyptians, and things of that nature, and put, Israelite there to put the national identity as well as the nationalism that was going forth. So could you speak on that? Because you say sovereign nationalism. So what do you mean and how do you define that? Because the word sovereign is being used by a handful of organizations today, and it seems to be similar to communism back when they used that. So if you could define the phraseology you use, and I think you will help a lot of people out there that's listening to people use that phraseology.
Right. Let me open a document I have. I think I can get to it quickly, where I kind of wrote down or typed out the definition of sovereign nationalism, or just sovereignty, period, because that is a very controversial topic. And I'm glad you pointed that out, because I don't mean it in the way that perhaps most of us do. Let me see here. Just bear with me for one sec.
Is it in a network group?
I'm sorry? Is it? Oh.
Is it in the network group? In the files in the network group, did you put them in there? You probably muted.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me, bro?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, you're gonna have to bear with me. I'm kind of green when it comes to all of this, but no, it's in a file on my desktop. I just need to find it, and I think it's worth doing, really.
Okay, while you looking for that, just bear with me and talk about this then.
All right.
Y'all used to have a website called Preparing the Way, correct?
Well, it was preparing.org. Yes, sir, we did.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because a lot of people might know y'all from that, and if they come over here and listen to the show, they might reminisce about that time period when y'all had that website. So what was the basis of that website, and how do it different from what y'all doing currently?
Wow, that's a great question. Let me see. Now I need to mute my microphone when I speak. Is that what it is? No.
When I'm speaking to you, you're gonna get an echo if your mic pick it up.
I did.
And back and forth if you know. So when you speak, I'm gonna try my best to kill my mic, so, and vice versa.
Right. Okay. Okay. So, you asked me about the website. Basically, what we were doing then was preparing the way, meaning we understood that this season that we're in now was yet to come. And so rather than just stand idly by, we began to make inroads into the various streams of quote Black nationalism. I like what you said in terms of the whole idea of Israelite nationalism. In other words, everybody is a Hebrew Israelite, or is an Israelite, whether they know it or not, among our people. And so we don't like to draw that distinction where we're Israelites and they're not, just because they don't know it. So at any rate, we had a really a broad vision. We came out of dealing with Pentecostal churches, and so we had to include that as part of our strategy. But we also understood the necessity of the cultural connection to the covenant. And so we fundamentally reached out once the internet came forth online to everybody. And our mission was to prepare for the transition from business as usual to the establishing of kingdom order across the board for our people at large. And we had controversy all the way around, but that's basically what it was. And Brother Shabar functioned as a forerunner, as a prophet, to prepare our people for this season. And so that was basically the meaning of that ministry. As opposed to now, this is the season when he's building the nation. And so we've shifted emphasis. Let me put it this way. We were prophesying kingdom order during that period. Now we are seeking to help establish that order. And so we planted seeds, we laid the groundwork, we put controversial issues out there. And really what we did online for the most part was seek to shift the dialogue style away from debate to, if prophets are speaking, the spirit of the prophets is subject to the prophets. And so we wanted to kind of re-educate the nation in terms of how to communicate in ways that were constructive and progressive, as opposed to getting bogged down in debates and demonstrating which Israelites had the sharpest swords and the like. And I must tell you, we had good success. We were blessed. We made a lot of connections with some marvelous men that remain to this day. There are a couple of men who have agreed to serve on our executive committee, all of which are Zaquin, are over 50. And so we're delighted that that season went the way it did. And I must say too, through all that period, operate and or in otherwise or in any other way kind of compromise the authenticity of that ministry or get money. I mean, we were giving CDs away and saying if you got some change, we can dig it. Otherwise, here it is. And so having stayed the course and resisted the temptation to build according to that understanding, the Father rewarded me in 2014 and showed me how I could set up an organization that would go around that. And so we did. And that's why we are just now in this recent period operating with a bank account and the whole nine. You know what I'm saying? Because we found a way to do that where we wouldn't have to compromise. We wouldn't be essentially an extension of the federal government or any power other than the Most High. And so we're under the laws of the land, but we're not trying to be unlawful in the sense that, the powers that be, they don't bear the sword in vain. That's what the book said. So I'm not going to go out and rape and rob and kill because I believe in the Elohim of Yisrael. So that's our holiness. But in terms of our right to organize and govern strictly according to that which is written, we do have that. And we're doing that. And it is proving to be just what he said it would be. So that's where we're at right now. We're trying to gather a broader cross-section of leadership beyond the leaders that we have to create a consensus for the need for a government community in this captivity.
Okay, let's deal with that some. Now, I hopefully you pulling out that documentation. So, you had a handful of statements dealing with faith. So one of the first ones is a very controversial one, and I think it has a lot to do with nation building at this time too, as it states. And I use this myself, as I was telling you before. I don't like to try to reinvent the wheel. It's already, probably do it a one better and get some tread tires or something to put on the wheel so it'll go better. But it say, are you Christian? Do you remember what y'all stated about that and how y'all dealt with that, and how would that deal with nation building or nationalism from the perspective sovereign or Israelite?
That is an excellent question. That's profound. Well, let me just start by saying that I can't remember verbatim what I wrote on that website, but I can certainly speak to that in that same spirit. Pardon me. The idea of rejecting the term Christ or Christian, to me, is a strategic mistake. I just think it's simplistic. I think it's semantical. I think it is an ill-fated attempt to separate ourselves from Christians through verbiage. And that just never did make sense to me. It alienates a whole body of our people that we're called to bring this truth to unnecessarily. And so to me, I can use the term Christ or Christian without compromise. And so why would I dismiss that term if I can have a bridge toward the Sunday Christians that I wouldn't otherwise have? In other words, if I reject the term Christian, the Christian-oriented brethren perceive me as being against Christ. And I think the irony of it is that many of us will accept the word Christ and yet reject the word Christian. I think that is indicative of the fact that it always was a strategic mistake from a nation building perspective to outlaw that term, as somehow those who use that are coons or less than true Hebrews, or that was just an we need to prove that we're Hebrews in ways other than reacting to the mistakes of churchianity. We need to be proactive and establish, we shouldn't build a ministry. I'm anti 12 tribes, or I'm anti Torah based, or I'm anti whatever. We are against things, but let us remain aware that the necessary way that we need to relate to the people is proactive. We need to represent the Most High. And in the process of that, we renounce other things. We shouldn't build a denomination, you know what I mean? Which is what that to denominate means to name. We're the anti-tribe people, you know what I mean? We're the baptism people. We're the water people. We're the Kufi people. This is unnecessarily divisive. And let me just add that what's dividing us more so than any kind of point of doctrine in the scripture is the terms messianic and non-messianic, and frankly, Torah and non-Torah. I'm Torah-based. I'm non-Torah-based. The reality is that is a Jewish vestige of our being slaves and of assumptions that we had that we brought into the Hebrew Israelite awareness. The truth is, Torah in Hebrew is instruction. The mitzvah is the law. So the Torah is instruction to know how to fulfill the mitzvot or the laws. So how can the prophets not be Torah? They're instructed. And so the whole book, the volume of the book is Torah. The Jews say it's the first 5 books, which comes from this Septuagint thing, the Pentateuch. The first 5, that's, Pentagon, Pentateuch 5. Torah is not 5. And so how can you be an Israelite and be non-Torah based when the volume of the book is instruction? And Shaul, or Paul, who was a primary source, who remains a primary source of the events surrounding the house of David and the kingdom of Yehuda in the 1st century, said that all scripture is given by inspiration of Yah and is profitable for instruction. So to that extent, if we stop saying, I believe in Yeshua or Yahusha, I'm messianic, you're not. A lot of so-called non-messianics believe in a Messiah. Moshe was a Messiah. He was a Mashiach. Yeshayahu or Isaiah, Yirmiyahu or Jeremiah, these are Mashiachs. And so I'm non-messianic is a non-Hebraic differentiation that is dividing us. So we need to move past that. Everybody is Torah-based that is a Hebrew Israelite, unless they reject the book, whether it's the first 5, the writings, the prophets, and in my judgment, the eyewitness primary source accounts in the New Covenant of the kingdom being established in the 1st century. And so, and I would also say that non-messianic, well, I already said that messianic and non-messianic, Torah and non-Torah, are destined, in my judgment, to be relics of the past. These are the major impediments, in my judgment, of bringing this nation together. And
okay, so to deal with like the essence of the question for us, like the term Christian, and I do have a copy of what y'all put down. As I told you, I've been in the know and researching things. So if you hit the blue thing called a chat up top on the left, if you just move your mouse over there to give you the options of it, you could actually see what it is that y'all wrote. Are you Christian? Answer, technically, yes. The word Christian simply refers to one who is partakers of Christ and his anointing. So are you able to see that?
yeah, I see it, bro.
Okay, well, that's exactly what was on the website. So if you want to take a look at it, and I don't know how long you got, but I'm we just gonna keep it flowing as long as you want to let this flow, so you don't have to worry about a time restraint unless you got one.
I'm good for a little longer, no doubt about it. So you wanted me to comment on this, like break this down?
Yeah, like the mindset and how it works in it, because you know a lot of people, they don't know that that quote unquote the prophet, quote unquote the prophet Noble Jew Ali built um the Moorish Science Temple of America on a pretty much non-profit 501(c)(3) non-profit layout in a religious um or ecclesiastical principality. And when you say sovereign, a lot of the sovereign dialogue and discourse come from so-called Moors and stuff. So I don't want people to, you know, misconstrue what's going on. So the term Christian, the term church, First Amendment, the sovereignty and autonomy for spheres or fears, however you say that, SPHERE. Sometimes I pronounce stuff different. That's the spelling. Fears or spears, however you say it. You know, can you speak on those things? Are you aware of what I'm talking about?
Well, let me try to deal with sovereignty. The first thing we need to say about that is sovereignty in this context is a legal term. And what we need to understand is that according to current understanding of this world, jurisprudence is a theory, which means that sovereignty and other legal terminology are not established. They're in flux, they're growing. And so I see sovereignty as something that we need to redefine. How are we going to rule the nations and we just accept prima facie the way they use terms? Now we have to understand. Let me say this: a monarchy, in my mind, from the Bible, means a government run by a king. But for them, the word monarchy means uh, a government, a like a parliamentary democracy with the king as a figurehead. A constitutional monarchy, in their understanding, is when the power is vested in the person of the king. And so, to try to describe the government that I see needed to come forth, I have to use their terminology. I would call it a theocratic constitutional monarchy. So the language is confusing. And so we have to kind of redefine language. For example, and I'll get back to sovereignty in a minute, but I just want to give you this example: capitalism, communism. You know, these terms are, we have to move past that, but we need language to do that. We're not communists, although we're communalists, as it were. But we can't use communist because that brings to mind, in the common language, a a government like Russia, where the state is controlling everything instead of Yah. So we're not communists, we're not socialists. So we have to form new language. So we are stewardists. We believe in stewardism. We have to come up with new language. What does that mean? We have all things in common. We believe that all things are in the possession of Yah, and that we are merely stewards over that which He has placed under each of us. That is the kingdom economic formula that removes the context of covetousness and the love of money, which uproots everything that is an impediment to the progress of Israel in the world. And so we're on a slippery slope. I mean, sovereign has to be redefined by us. And so part of our taking back our culture means taking back the right to refine and define the language. And so by sovereign, what I mean is not to be free of the government of the United States as a citizen or anything like that. When I use sovereign, I'm saying the right to establish and govern ourselves according to Torah in captivity. I'm not talking about declaring that I am no longer an American citizen. I don't see any benefit or wisdom in doing that at this time. I believe that once we demonstrate the capacity to rule ourselves and govern ourselves outside of the parameters of 501(c)(3, meaning we can We're not a board of directors. You know, I'm not a CEO. He told us to pray our Father in heaven, not our president in heaven, our CEO. According where we can govern ourselves and organize ourselves according to Torah in a community, not a Knesset, a church, or a congregation or a camp or whatever rhetoric we want to apply to it, but a self-contained community where we are committed to living with one another and synergizing our lives and our resources. That is a demonstration that in every captivity in Yisrael, we had our own communities. And that's why Nebuchadnezzar and Haman and these others weren't able to fully disenfranchise us the way America has. And so we need, for that reason and many other reasons, a witness of that. So I'm not looking to be sovereign in the sense that we're out from under the citizenship of America. I don't think that's necessary. I think all we need to do is demonstrate and build the kingdom in this captivity like we did in the past, and y'all will turn the hearts of our captors. And that's it. That's Torah, that's scripture. Anything else is adding to the revelation. And we should not, above all things, we should not remove the ancient landmarks our fathers have said, even in terms of methodology, you know, and not just.
So this is most definitely self-governing, meaning you have full ownership of your mind and free will.
Yes, I think that, you know, there's a scripture that says a servant is the master's free man, and a free man is a servant of the master. In other words, if we're going to be holistic, which is Hebrew, then we have to look at this inside out. I am free in my spirit. If I'm in chains, someone can't chain my spirit and chain my mind, so that we have to redefine what freedom is. It's just like life and death. For the nations, life means existence. For us, life is the ruach. You know, if the body without the spirit is dead. So, you know, you can be dead while you live. And so in my judgment, we have to bring the spirit of Eastern thought, as it were, or Hebraic understanding to this terminology. And we're in process. And so right now, there's a lot of confusion concerning these terms. But what I would urge everyone to do is just be patient. If someone says sovereign, it doesn't mean that they should be automatically categorized in a group that you disagree with. Let's just exercise some patience and really listen and come to understand what a man means by what we say. And that's what I appreciate about this opportunity and what it is you're saying. And so I think if we just slow down and don't be so quick to denounce one another and understand that where the spirit is in the word, we are in a transitionary period. And so to expect perfection and to apply scriptures that were written to congregations or synagogues or churches or groups that were already in order is a mistake. In other words, I can't, if there's no established government in Israel, I can't condemn someone because there's no orderly process to do that. So I should put that on the shelf. And we're not doing that. We're behaving as if our government is established when it is not. So let us get about the business of building the government of the kingdom of Yehuda. And then let's deal from that legitimate authority with the doctrinal and legal and moral issues of the day.
Well, like I said, let's go into that some, because I believe the term, as stated in what y'all wrote on preparing the way, or preparing.org, as it was at the time, that
right.
It is a legal term that even the government of the world acknowledge today, a Christian, right? One don't know what a true Christian is. So therefore, the poster boys or poster girls and what they have out there now is not, you know, it had been usurped by the Greco-Romans, right? And it was used to bring about, you know, the Council of Nicaea, vision of things, but we know that it's greater than that, and it's truly supposed to be bringing about the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God, which is the kingdom of Israel. So how do you deal with that? Because you say you're not a 501c3 corporation and this and that. So to corporate yourself in America as a church is one thing, or to be a church is another. So can you speak on those things and give a little insight how y'all manage that, not being a 501c3 entity?
He kind of put that in a nutshell for me. Brother, can you hear me? Okay. I saw on the screen where it says you muted my microphone. Is there something I'm doing wrong, because I can't hear you? So.
Nah, I mean, you good now. I'm trying to deal with the fact that when I was speaking, you was muted, and I was trying to say you need to unmute yourself. So it's still just getting the balance of that out. You just got to be aware that you got to work your microphone some. But like,
Right,
let me see. So speak now.
Yes, can you hear me?
Okay, I can mute you and unmute you. So based up on my talking and not talking, I'm gonna control the mic. I didn't know I had that much control over it. So
that'll work, because I can't. I'm trying to read what you're writing on the side here, and I'm trying in the chat thing, and so on. So what I want to say is I need you to kind of summarize what it is you were asking, because I'm not clear on what you're getting at. I'm not really understanding what you're asking.
Number one, I just break it down. Tell us about being a 501c3 non-status entity.
Oh, okay. Well, the reason I think that's so important is simply because, well, let me say this. I'm not trying to be unlawful. And so a lot of our people have been attempting to gain parity with the broader society legally, meaning, they'll say, well, so-called whites, and I don't accept the terms white and black, but I'm going to use that for the sake of making this point. Whites can have uh, powdered cocaine and get caught with it and get a slap on the wrist. Where if we sell crack cocaine, $5 worth, we get the book thrown at us. And this implies that our equality is somehow linked to having the right to do as much lawless madness as the Gentiles. And of course, Yah's hand of correction is going to be harder on us because we are his. And so that's one thing I need to say. We need to approach law outside of that vestige of our having been enslaved. So by sovereign and being non-501c3, I simply am saying I'm not trying to be unlawful. I don't want to be out from under the laws of the government. I don't need to do that, because if you do righteousness according to Torah, will you not have praise of the same? The reason now, and obviously America has been excessive and abusive in her meting out of so-called justice against our people. But having said that, a lot of us are behaving in outrageous, ridiculous ways, and so if we are righteous in Torah, then that becomes irrelevant. Getting out from under the laws of America is irrelevant. It's immaterial. It has nothing to do. Yah will fight our battles. So my concern is that we organize outside of 501c3 parameters. In other words, the government has stipulations as to what you can say and not say, and they will pull that plug when they get ready, if that's what they need to do. If we're foolish enough to come under that, and basically that's driven by greed. Oh yeah, I don't have to pay taxes, so I can become a 501c3. No, I was willing to pay taxes rather than do that and organize. But I knew I couldn't be a corporation, because a corporation is like a person, a living legal entity. How is that? That's obviously anti-Torah to me. So my point of establishing this as a non-501c3 unincorporated association was so that I can use in our church constitution language like apostle or we're not a board of directors. We don't have to have minutes. There are no requirements upon us. We have the right to organize and govern ourselves according to Torah. And that is what I was concerned with. And so that becomes a context for a kingdom government to emerge. In other words, we can do business of gathering leadership and trying to come to some acclamation point on the nature and form of government that we have to build. So when I use sovereignty, that's the only way. And really, I'm thinking about just not even using that if it's going to alienate our people, or maybe I just need to define that. And so I'm still in process in terms of the way to approach that. But I think what needs to happen is we need to lift the stigma off the word sovereignty by redefining it according to Hebraic terms, so people are clear on what it is we mean. We're not talking about battling the courts that I'm not who my government name says. That's a distraction and a from what it is I'm doing anyway. I mean, there may be those who do that. Attack. It is an analysis. You know, I love my brethren, but for me, I have to pick my battles, and I think focusing on building a community becomes the key to moving toward being able to bring judgment to our nation and get sin out of our midst, to purge out rebels from among us, to create unity of thought. I mean, and to demonstrate before the United Nations, rather than petition them, that we are in fact a kingdom, meaning we can self-rule. And so once we get to that level, I see ourselves coming forth with a body of information, but no constitution. We have a constitution already. So we simply need to reaffirm that and gain a consensus on what it is, what form of government we have to build, and that our priorities must include, in my judgment, the building of a community in captivity.
Well, as I was stating before, the term theocracy is what was given us. It's
Right.
I believe it came about due to Flavius Josephus trying to explain in his writings what form of government,
Right.
The nation of Israel was.
Right. And then, but then there were laws in place at the time Josephus was writing in the first century. So we need to understand that the language has changed, terminology has changed. Clearly, much has happened. You know, the Magna Carta in the Middle Ages, and that, the French Revolution in the United States, the whole notion of we the people, the age of reason. So we're at a point in history, in my judgment, where we have to really rethink everything. And that's basically what I did. I mean, I just stepped away from everyone and just got with the Holy Spirit and got in the book. Now, I've read, great authors and scholars among our people, Carter Woodson and Ivan Van Sertima and Dr. Yosef Ben Yakinen, Asherah Kwesi, various schools of thought. And so I'm not unlearned in that way. I don't believe in ignorance, but I also know that the much books and learning, so says the most wise man that ever lived, makes the soul weary. I mean, at some point we need to get down to fundamentals and see those things as superfluous. And so I just want to keep bringing us back to the necessity to focus on these real things and not get into the snare of semantics. And that really, again, Torah, non-Torah, Christian, Messianic, Yeshua, Yahawashai, Yehoshua. These are unnecessary distractions, and it just is strategically unwise. And so with great tension between my brethren who disagree, I will continue to declare the necessity to move beyond trying to define ourselves in that way, and be about the business of building community, and then allowing the truth of that to emanate from that. In other words, it's
Well,
an interfaith,
yeah,
without.
well, let's get into that a little bit more, because the First Amendment right to operate and govern yourself as a autonomy, right, is there, and a lot of people don't understand that that First Amendment give us that right.
Right.
So to be a church autonomy is something that I believe you're dealing with. Could you explain it to the people how, once again, you're not 501c3, but I call it churchonomics, where you're dealing with the church and the economics of the church from tithes and offering and that system. Some will say that it's not still in use today. I beg to differ, but could you get into how y'all operate like that?
Okay, well, you mentioned the word tithes, and it brought to mind the first thing that comes to my mind is the Sunday pastors uh, suggest that you're robbing God. Malachi says you're robbing God in tithes and offerings. The reality is, Malachi was speaking to the preachers who robbed the Most High. He was not speaking to the congregation, and so this is a misused passage, which is really an indictment of the ones that are saying that. And so tithing, there's nothing wrong with giving 10% of one's income, but to use the law to say tithing and then say the Old Testament is no good, it's just that whole construct, it needs to be balled up and thrown away. It's irrelevant. It's ridiculous, and the fruit of it is evident in the communities where.
Well, in what sense, once again, we got false teachers and usurpers of the system that really supposed to be ran. That's like saying, the kingdom of God is no good because people that's using it, using the system and using it wrongly. So my thing is not to really get into the ties and the churchonomics of things right now, but the fact that 501c3 is there for the non-profit aspect of it and stuff. So I really didn't want to focus on the economics of it, but the fact that one is trying to function outside of that. So I don't know if y'all take ties or not, and it might be something to talk about a little deeper into the discourse that we having. But the functioning of the body is what I'm trying to get to. Y'all function as this body, and no one knows how y'all functioning but those that's a part of it. So I'm trying to get an inside conversation about the functionality of what y'all done set up under the First Amendment, or what did y'all set it up under? How is its sovereignty capacity or whatever? People ignorant of that, they would love to understand it. I know they would.
Okay, well, this is what I see, that the Constitution says that uh, churches and governments shall be exempt from paying taxes, not because they are a philanthropic extension of the government, but that they are not uh, structurally obligated the way corporations are. And so that's what I took advantage of. That's what I perceive as being the way we need to go. So I organized the founding documents in that way and called upon that principle, that the Constitution uh, has stated from the beginning, that the government, well, I think they have, what would it say? We shall not make, Congress shall make no law concerning uh, the organizing or the establishing of a religion, nor prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That's a pretty close paraphrase. And so that was the way I thought we needed to approach that. In other words, I'm not looking to be sovereign in the sense that I'm no longer, at this point, ultimately, yes, but at this point, I'm no longer an American citizen. I am a Hebrew Israelite national. I'm that in the spirit. What I'm looking to do is find a way within the captivity to organize according to the Torah. And so let me just say, when I say church, church just means set apart ones. So I use that language because that's the language that the majority of our people use. But I don't mean it can be where two or three people are. It doesn't. We're not trying to build a congregation in the traditional sense. This is more about gathering a government in the wilderness. Jerusalem consisted of David, the royal house, his family, his extended family, people who were connected to him, his mighty men, not going to a random city. I like this house. Can I buy this? And you have to meet your neighbors. And so we're trying to reestablish a community according to principles of the scripture. So I'm not trying to build a church or even build a congregation. It's more like a an unincorporated association. We have people who are working with us from around the world that are not here physically. And by the way, I want to add that the internet adds that dimension. In other words, we deal with the Most High sight unseen. There's something about that. That's why I don't like to appear and show my face everywhere. Because when you close your eyes and just listen to someone's voice, you receive them in ways that you can't when you're looking in their face. That's why, for example, the Apostle Paul wrote letters to people and said, let me just say this to you so I don't have to come and deal with that. So when we get there, we can deal another way. The Greeks were saying his bodily presence is weak, but and speech is contemptible, but his letters are weighty and powerful. So writing, being a scribe is a way to minister in ways that you can't do face to face. So we're really redefining church.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that, and we was talking. I said in Acts 7, and I think it's 38 or whatever. It said it was the church in the wilderness. The people is the church, not the church
exactly.
building. The building that the church owned, which people call that the church. No, that's the place where the church gather. That's not the church. The people are. So that in itself give you a body. Now the body has what type of body politics?
Exactly. That is exactly right. And I might tell you that that translates into Hebrew understanding as well. In other words, we're not as free from our Euro-Gentile orientation as we think. For example, I've heard brethren say, I'm going to Israel. And I'm saying, no, you're not going. You are Yisrael. We're not going there. That's Eretz Yisrael. That is our land. And so Yah loves the people of Zion more than the land of Zion. And this is a sticking point. And what I'm trying to do is cause our people to see that that is connected to the. In other words, how can we be against Christians for saying they're going to church and looking at that building as the church when we're looking at the land of Israel as Israel itself? So
Well,
where
that's
we are
interesting.
is where Israel is. I'm sorry.
That's interesting because Daniel 9 and 19 or whatever he called the land and the people Israel and surnamed them after himself. Also
Well,
Jerusalem.
yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I'm not suggesting that the land is not us, but what I'm saying is there is an order. The
Yeah,
land.
but I'm just saying in a sense where people thinking about a physical locale, and it's like you're the locale also. Don't forget that you are Israel, not that spot over there. You're Israel. That spot is also known as Israel. Don't get yourself confused. You know what I'm saying?
I agree. That's exactly right. So I'm not denying that he placed his name in Zion at one point and said, I'll have my name here. But what I'm saying is that it's based upon the presence of the people who are Israel. Israel was a man. He wasn't a land. The land was named after a man. A man wasn't named after the land. So I'm talking about order. I'm not talking about either or. I'm just saying in order. And we put the world is about being upside down. Materialism and maternalism are two sides of the same coin. They have the same Latin root, mater, mater, which means material. The natural world. And we need to have the natural world came out from the spirit world, just like a woman came out from a man. So we need male and female. We need the spiritual dimension and the earthly dimension. But it has to be in order. And what the problem is mankind is seeking to exalt the feminine right now. And that does include the material earth. And we don't reject, we're not misogynist. We just say that the spirit is over the flesh. The man is over the woman. And the earth is made for the sons of men. The sons of men weren't made for the earth. So it's a matter of order, not either or. So I hope that kind of clears up that confusion. It certainly does in my mind, but absolutely the idea of us calling a building the church or calling that land Israel, it is Israel. But in other words, replacing, there's nothing wrong with having a place to gather, but to fail to recognize that we are a holy temple or a set apart temple, I should say, raised up unto the Most High is a mistake. And that language of going to Israel, going to church, if we're not careful, it it really it devalues the fact that we are living stones in that temple, and it is an incentive not to purify. In other words, if our bodies are the temple, that's an incentive to live according to the principles and the moral standards set in Torah. But if
But
not,
would you agree? Would you agree that it distorts the stewardship of things because you're supposed to have stewardship over yourself, those who have been given stewardship over the flock that he purchased with his own blood, Acts 20:28, over the flock that the Holy Ghost of the separate one, as you say, the however you were saying that. I'm trying to get the terminology that you use so we can have the same speech. But that we are to have stewardship over that, just like the building or even the land. When we go there, it's enjoying the Sabbath that we're away. But when we go there, we are to have stewardship over it. It shouldn't be the vice versa.
well, I guess we're just saying the same thing. I agree 100%. And my challenge is, again, to move beyond these doctrinal differences. You know what? Uh, there's a scripture that said, the God of this world has blinded the minds of them that believe not. And so much of what we're saying is falling on deaf ears because there are persons who can't perceive in that dimension. So we're going to have to do a witness in the natural dimension, which is about food and clothing and what shall we eat and us working together. When the Gentiles saw that in the first century, that it wasn't the garments, it wasn't the Hebrew tongue, it was the willingness to forsake everything and have all things in common. They said, look at how they love need a display. When my sons were learning to walk, they couldn't talk. So I couldn't say, now, son, you put your foot in front of here and the ball of your foot is going. No, they had to see me walk because they weren't at a stage where they could understand the concept from from my speech. And so it is with our people at this hour. I mean, we need to recognize that they can't understand what it is. It's foolishness to them. Like the guy, young Pharaoh, that thinks black women are God. I mean, he's extremely articulate and intelligent. I heard him debating with the mighty Hebrew, and he could not hear what the mighty Hebrew was saying because he's not on that level. He's not spiritual. He has to see what we do. When that happens, then he will be transformed by that witness. And so that becomes a challenge in my judgment to discern the fact that there are persons who just, it's not given to them yet. And so I'm about the business of doing that which will make what we understand available to everyone, whether they're born from above, whether they know they're Israel, whether they are pagans, whether they are atheists. That display is what has to happen. And that, if you look back through the scriptures, that is every reform and every revival came about at that level. And so that's what's missing in my judgment. With all of our rhetoric, there's no demonstration of the spirit and the power in terms of governing our people, not building a congregation. Anybody can do that. And we come there and sing our songs and somebody gets up and speaks and we go back home to our misery. I'm talking about pooling our resources, having all things in common. It was done in Demona to some extent. And that mighty work is in some ways undercut by the fact that they are facing the burden of compromise to secure uh, citizenship and permanent residency status. And so our brothers, and I love them, and man, the love in that community is amazing. And it demonstrates that we can self-govern, but we have to do something similar here, where we don't have that burden, where our citizenship is without question. We need to build without that pressure, and it so that we are totally uncompromised. Whether it's polygyny being a legitimate form of Hebrew family expression, or the right to have our own flag, or whatever it is that has to do with our of the Most High restoring the kingdom to Yisrael as it's prophesied that would happen. we are a set apart nation, the Apostle Peter said. So they understood that those who came to Christ became naturalized citizens of the nation of Yisrael.
Well, let's talk about that, because in my Israelite nationalism that I speak on and try to show people, I'm like, y'all don't understand the Commonwealth of Israel, the grafting in, or the sojourners, and that's just nationalizing people into the body, into the fold. So you just spoke on that, and it was nice to hear how you said it. So could you magnify that for the people a little bit, because I think a lot of Israelites that's aware are unaware of that aspect of the Commonwealth.
Well, I mean, clearly, the idea of the church replaces Israel is a Euro-Gentile misunderstanding of a Hebraic book. Uh, they are naturalized citizens. They are grafted in as a wild olive branch. They become, well, the fact that we use the term Hebrew Israelites in and of itself is an indication that there are other kinds of Israelites. Well, there are Hebrew Ishmaelites, for example. So there are other kinds of Hebrews. And so clearly, if those who sojourn among us embrace our culture, and they are welcome under the promise that Yah made to Abraham. Clearly, in thy seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Now, some people say, oh, well, that word earth meant land, and that's only Israelites. I don't really want to get bogged down into that, because it really is a distraction again. But absolutely, the notion that there's something different between Christians and Israel is a formula for war. That's what that is. That's just a trick of the enemy to divide and conquer. And so, yeah, I certainly would say that the understanding that this adoption is a Torah-based principle, and that there are people who can become Israelites. You can be a Nigerian Israelite. You can be an Ethiopian Israelite by joining our nation. America imitates that. So in other words, America is a melting pot of all nations coming together and being Americans. Italian Americans, German Americans, African Americans, Russian. This is their concept under one theology or ideology. And really, it's a religion. It's a theology that all men are created equal. You have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In other words, you can come here and become wealthy, even if you come from poverty. So that is the appeal of America. And Israel is, we all come together from other nations under the original children and are grafted in and adopted and take on the culture. But our ideology is the spirit is over the flesh. So the pursuit of happiness is not the accumulation of wealth. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of the things which he possesses. That's just plain and simple. So abundant life, no, I'm not, you don't need a vow of poverty to be an Israelite, Yah forbid. And as a matter of fact, it's the opposite, but it's just how we use it. So clearly, I'm in 100% agreement that the spirit of adoption, that has to be understood. But again, we can talk about that, but we're not going to establish that among those who don't have that gift the way you have.
Well, let's speak about that, because I came up with a statement a while back that the Bible is the best tool for our liberation. And I totally agree with that, and I totally stand on that, and I defend that statement whenever and whatever. Yeah, right. So in doing that, the brother by the name of Divine Prospect, you probably heard of him. I see that you keep up with some of the stuff that's going on the internet and stuff. He came out there on the West and went to LA and was dealing with some pastor out there. I forget his name, but he said, which ideology is better for the liberation of our people, Hebrew Israelite or Christian? So I was trying to challenge him to a discourse about it, more of a debate or whatever, but a discourse where we deal with that and what we dealing with here tonight, because these terms like Hebrew Israelite, I really don't deal with it, but I'm hearing how you deal with it. You saying that, and as you said, a Gentile Israelite or Israelite will be a terminology that comes about saying they're part of the nation of Yisrael or Israel, but not physically of the stock of Jacob. So could you elaborate on that? The idea that he would come up with a Hebrew Israelite ideology versus a Christian ideology, because I say, well, they both in the same, unless you using Hebrew Israelite as a religious connotation, using it just like the term Christian would be used as a religious statement.
Well, I certainly agree with you. I think that, again, we can trace all of these problems of division back to semantics and back to language. There, a Hebrew Israelite versus Christian. Hebrew Israelite is a nationality and a culture, and Christian, as it is used, has become a quote religion. Now, as you know, many of us who are Israelites reject that, or who have the ethnicity of Hebrew, and our Israelites reject that language. I lost my thought. Well, suffice it to say, the division is false. It's ridiculous, and it's not true. A true Christian means anointed. A true anointed one is a Hebrew. You can't be anointed without the Hebrew culture. So that is taking on the culture. Christians can't have. You can't be a Christian without the Hebrew culture, to use the language in the way that it's being used. That's a misnomer. So that is a debate that doesn't need to exist. There is no separation. There's no subject. A Christian first century who was a Hebrew who accepted the atoning death, resurrection of Yeshua. So they were Hebrews. They didn't become something else. And so I don't. To me, that's
Yeah,
not.
that's why I say that terminology sometimes is tricky to people, because some people use Hebrew Israelite as they speak Hebrew and they're Israelite of the nation of Israel. Some say, well, I come through the lineage of Abraham, the first Hebrew, and therefore I use Hebrew and Israelite. They'll even go with Paul said, are you a Hebrew? Well, I'm a Hebrew. Are you an Israelite? I'm an Israelite. But like to say, like I tell people, the first Christians were the Israelites that followed Christ, because he came to his own and they received him not. But as many as received him, gave him the power to become sons of God, not after the flesh, but after the spirit, as you can read in John, Saint John, that is. So that's where kind of, I see people losing the understanding that the first Christians, the first to be called Christian, was Israelites. So what is a Christian, an Israelite? If you look at it like, so what is a Christian? Oh, and they point at the Israelite that followed Christ and said that's a Christian. And so the culture and stuff is already there because they're Israelites or Hebrews that follow Christ.
Well, this is a very complex subject. Let me say that you know how can I put this? I think that we have to recognize that this is about a nation, and I think that's the way to draw the distinction between Hebrew Israelite and Christian. You know, eh, Christian, they see themselves as a church apart from a nation. They don't understand that what came forth was a nation. Yeshua reestablished the house of David. That's what he was doing. So the power shifted into his hands. That's why he left his brother Yaakov or James over the church at Jerusalem, as opposed to Peter, James, and John, for example. I mean, his boys that were running with him believed him during his ministry. James was with his sided with his mother, was saying he's nuts. He's beside himself. And yet, why did he choose him? Because he was next in line to the throne of David. And so the house of David, by all accounts, certainly the historians, I mean, Eusebius comes to mind, who said that the Greeks called them the Despossene, I think that's how they said that. the family of Yeshua, the royal house, ruled the churches. And it was not until our enemies were able to overthrow that Constantine was able to have that council and create what we now see in this monstrosity that has replaced that. And so if we get both sides to understand that what Yeshua was doing was restoring the house of raising up the tabernacle, according to Peter's testimony, raising up the tabernacle of David that is fallen. The scripture said, I will rebuild his ruins as in the days of old. But if you look at that scripture, the word ruin is the word banah, which is family. So what he was saying was, I would raise up David's family as in the days of old. And that's what it was. So if Hebrew Israelite oriented brethren understand that that's what was going on, that will help them to, and those who claim the word Christian, then both factions will begin to understand the cultural connection to the covenant. In other words, that this is about a nation. It's not about anything other than that. It's not a religion. Religion means to hold back, keep down, and restrain. I would say even that pure religion and undefiled is visiting widows and orphans in their distress, according to the royal prince Yaakov, the brother of the Messiah, and keeping oneself unspotted from the world. We need to have holdback and restraint against our flesh, against our wickedness. So in that sense, we need religion, but religion is not it was never intended to be institutionalized. That's
Well,
Constantine,
I
churchianity.
say religion, that's the term, and as you said earlier, defining terms, which we got to do do more of that, and have people follow the correct definition that we put it back in, instead of the definition that even the world takes. So if you go to it, it's divine principles, it's divine acts that one have to do. That's religion is. So when you keep the Sabbath day, they say, oh, you religious because you keep this day, this every 7 day, as a holy day. You keep this feast, or you keep that's that Jewish religion because I keep the Passover. No, that's a cultural precept intrinsic within the text that I'm supposed to do. It ain't got nothing to do with religion, but it is a divine act that's stated for me to do. And once I do it and do it religiously, you call me religious. So I don't think people use it properly.
I know they don't. I agree with you. But I guess really what my overriding concern is now, well, you asked me earlier, what was the difference between preparing.org and KYCN, or what we're doing now? And fundamentally, it's about, we prepared the way. In other words, we have made our doctrine and our positions very clear to the whole nation, as it were, whether it's Pentecostals, charismatics, Hebrew Israelites, conscious community. It's clear where we're at. But what we're saying now is, in this season, in order to establish who is right and who is the voice of the Most High at this hour, we must build a community. Only out of that context can we create a consensus and move as a united front, or put forth a united front and move in concert to get the boot of our enemies off our neck. And so that's where my focus is. And I agree with you, but in some sense, at the moment, that's not where the spirit is in the word. So it becomes, for me, an irrelevancy and a distraction.
Let's get into that some more, because I mean that's where I want to be at, but it seemed like somehow or another we always floating off of that. We need to stay anchored with that. So have you heard of the African village in what is it, South or North Carolina, where they shot Root Set and everything? And I forget the name of the brother. His father was bringing back a lot of African stuff. It's a village out there. It's an African village. I forget the name of it. I'm gonna see if I can find the and I'm not too good with names and stuff, but I'm gonna see if I can find the son right quick. And but have y'all looked into things like that, where you have this African village in North Carolina and things of that nature, where it can be like a a blueprint of something that could be done here?
Yes, I have. And I am with great tension and great difficulty seeking to reach out to the brethren in Demona for their help in terms of their experience at the nuts and bolts of that. And so I'm aware of that. But what I'm saying, I think that's different is that the community that we build has to be Jerusalem. I believe that Jerusalem, the people are here, and that that city, in other words, the government has to come forth in the wilderness, and that's different than communal living where it's egalitarian and we all make mutual decisions or whatever. In other words, we can have a community, but if it's governed according to democracy, then it will have no effect in terms of moving the hand of the Most High and turning the hearts of our enemies. And so I have yet to see that happen or even heard a call that similar to what it is I'm making before our people at this hour. So I love those people. I'm drawing on that. There's a brother I know named Kanok who has the Israel Family Farm. I designed his first logo way back in, I guess, '05 or so. And he's in Italy and he's working to establish agriculture in urban communities. There are people who are doing marvelous things in terms of wind and solar and how do we get water and how can we get off the grid. And so I'm gathering all of those persons. There's no question. The added dimension I'm bringing is we have to set up a government according to Torah. We can't, and our people are not doing that, where we all vote on it and we all do this. The actual government. And so we can have other communities around the nation and around the world. I mean, and learn from them, like you were saying earlier when we were talking before we went on the air. I mean, clearly, we have much to learn from those who have that experience. As a matter of fact, my treasurer on the executive committee, Yohanan, aka Roosevelt Brown, comes from a charismatic background and found his truth and is lined up with me, and we're knitted together at the hip, man. And this is like he was a part of a community in Oregon in the '90s that ended up becoming a cult and ended up turning negative. But it started as a group of men in Los Angeles pooling their resources and forsaking riches and basketball fame to build a community, and it worked. So he has experience uh, at doing that very thing that I don't have. So we have someone on our executive committee who has the capacity to help facilitate that process. I don't. And so, but that's how we feel about that. As a matter of fact, somebody came in my Facebook group and posted something about a community, and he had a video and he was walking through and showing it. It was just, it's like when you look at Demona, it's like, this is, that's what's up, where we are in our own culture, dressing our own way. Our children know who they are from jump. We share, we have all things in common. And out of that context will merge doctrinal unity, not the other way around. We're not going to get doctrinal unity and then get, or unanimity or whatever, and then get
Well,
a community. It has
national,
to happen the other way around.
yeah, national unity brings that, because then you can utilize the culture that comes out of that, and that's where the scripture was actually originated from, the agriculture aspect of it, the jubilee of the land and the people, and the you know all the different things that come about, not muzzling the ox, and what that details and stuff.
I agree. I just think we're on the same page. I certainly agree with you in terms of how you perceive these things. I mean, we're just on the same page. But again, I have to reiterate that trying to gain a consensus about this can't come through dialogue and debate and discussion. And so I've chosen to use my time and energy to build an organization and a government in the wilderness that will have the authority and by acclamation, a consensus of our people across the ideological spectrum, regardless as to faith tradition. I mean, Islam, whatever. Build that, and then let the unity come out of that. So we can have these discussions, understand that they are peripheral in the sense that we're seed planting. This is what preparing.org was about. And this is what we're doing right now. And the difference is we're moving it toward nation building. We haven't forsaken our understanding. We have just understood that we can't, we can prepare people for it, but we can't establish it without this project that we're embarking upon. And so uh, I'm amazed at your understanding and at the way you see this. And I'm not one to culturalize to the point where I dismiss our brothers who know Yah, and even those who do not. I mean, this has to be absolute. When you cast the net in, you cast it in, and whatever comes out, and you throw back that which is unclean afterward. And so a lot of us are still fishing with poles. A lot of us are disappointed because people are not being converted when we speak. We need to make that fundamental adjustment. And the letter kills, but the spirit gives life, as I know you know and understand or understand. The reality is that where the ruach is in the word becomes the key. You can say the right thing at the wrong time. And so
Well,
if we, oh, go ahead, brother.
no, what as we was talking beforehand, we spent about maybe 20-30 minutes beforehand. He came in early when I sent the link. As we was talking, like back then, like I said, I check out everybody's stuff,
Right.
and I understand pretty much who I align with and who I don't. So where people won't take me or even give credence to what I'm saying, it's like, well, I'm gonna bring my brother on, and when he get to talking, and you can see his work more than you can see mine, because mine just ain't materialized in the manner in which you didn't brought some material, vantage point to what you doing. Then it's like, well, listen to him, because I'm on accord with him, he on accord with me, and we see the same thing. We just at two different stages of the process right now. So like you say, it's just a matter of us talking some more and, fine tuning that we agree upon, and getting it to, gel even more for the rest of the world to see and hear, like, well, that mindset right there is the one that needs to go forth, and all them other ones need to take a back seat to a degree, because it's about nation building. That's all we talking about here. Though we might not be giving total clarity in this discourse, we're talking about nation building. He said sovereignty, nationalism. I say Israelite nationalism. So we could say Israelite sovereign nationalism. We can combine it. We can, it's a lot that can be done. So I'm appreciating the dialogue.
This is rich, it's fruitful, and I understand exactly what you're saying. And I would simply say that I know this is not in vain, because we are in agreement fundamentally on what needs to happen. And so that would have to strengthen you. One can chase 1,000, two can put 10,000 to flight, so that you are 5 times as strong, and so am I, when we are in unity. And that is a factor in forwarding this thing and advancing this kingdom, without question. So I'm not suggesting that our expectations must not be that in other words, when people see you and I working closely together and trusting one another, that's going to inspire them more than the particulars of the doctrine that we're saying. They will embrace what we say if it works for us. In other words, how can we agree, but then I don't like you and I talk behind your back and somebody found out I said Brother Carl was this? We have to be genuinely join together in love and pool our resources. Like I have a radio station I'm trying to do now. Let's do a simulcast with me and you and get some other brothers. We have to demonstrate the authenticity of what it is we say. But this is a great start, man, and I'm jazzed. I'm sitting here like, floating up off this seat. And I love you. I love your audience, and I love our people. And I'm thankful for this opportunity. And I do believe that that prayer that I offered up at the beginning was honored. And I'm thankful to the Most High for doing that. We are making headway. And what was said here, I believe, is constructive in the sense that it will begin to break down these barriers that are dividing us, where we can get to the point where you and I are where we can hear each other and work together and uh, interact with the intent to come to some conclusion. In other words, I'm not trying to show that I'm not you by disagreeing with you. We're operating on a mature level, and a lot of people just are not yet. And the way they will be is to see and hear and perceive elders operating. It's good and pleasant that we come together in unity. A lot of them don't believe that we can unite because they haven't seen it. They think, oh, well, doctrinal differences are inevitable. You ain't gonna never get no niggas to agree. Excuse my, you know what I mean? To all line up behind one thing. That's a cry of despair. The reality is, we can be perfectly joined together in the same mind and in the same judgment. I know that to be true. And so let us do that and demonstrate that. And
Well, in the power of defining that we talking about, see, like you dealt more with it with the first century, and I wanted to ask you that because I deal with the full preterist community or the preterist community. I don't know if you know what their terminology is about or their doctrinal view, but it's basically that all prophecy was fulfilled in 70 AD with the destruction of the temple. And so they said the kingdom came at that time, and Christ came back and set up the kingdom. And that's a whole nother world that I deal with, a whole nother community or whatever. But when you say he established the kingdom in the first century, that's what they say. So if you could you explain that? Because some of them gonna watch this. They watch me and they know that I'll be watching them. So if you could explain that, that probably will help them out a little bit.
Let me just say that the preterist notion that everything was fulfilled is an overreaction. Now, certainly, the destruction of the temple in 70 AD was the focus of the so-called Olivet Discourse, without question. When they said, which shall be the sign of your coming and the end of the age, they couldn't have possibly been asking him about the second coming as we know it, because they didn't believe he had to die. And so there are certain aspects of Matthew 24, Luke 21, that discourse, that were fulfilled without question. But the idea that everything has been fulfilled is ridiculous, frankly, with all due respect to those persons. And so I would say that, and I'm not sure. So I know that, but could you kind of rephrase the question? The
Question. Not the focus on the predators. I was just saying, you even made the statement that he set up the kingdom in the first century. I would say that same thing. I agree 100%. But as he said, the kingdom is in you, and as you were stating so nicely earlier, that things happen in the spirit, but they got to manifest in the flesh. And so it's a time before it manifests itself, as prophecy said. That's the stone being cut out, hitting them 10 toes. You got to get the 10 toes for him to hit it at the bottom of the image and spread throughout the earth. So prophecy itself, deals with anyone that says it's fulfilled completely. But, I would say it was set up in the first century. You said it, so I'm trying to just get you to state how you see that to the people that may have heard that statement, and especially those from that background heard it and like, well, what do we mean?
Well, I would say this, that the way I try to express this is that Yeshua said the kingdom of heaven is within you. It comes without observation. And so that's what was established in the first century. But when his disciples said, shall we at this, or will you at this time restore the kingdom of Israel? He said, no, it's not time for that. Or actually, he said, don't worry about that. You just preach the gospel or whatever it was he said. So the kingdom of Yisrael is an outward government that is peopled by men who are of the kingdom of Yah, meaning within. And Yeshua himself defined the abomination of desolation. He said, when you see that abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, then flee Judea and go for social. That was a clear reference to those armies encircling Jerusalem. So I would say that those of us who recognize who he is would have to take his word for what that interpretation is. So having said that, we would have to reassess our assumptions of Euro-Gentile eschatology, that somehow Satan is still on the throne. Yeshua said the sign of his being in heaven would be the overthrow of Jerusalem and the destruction of that temple. And that's exactly what happened. And so, but And here's what's interesting, man. Matthew, Mark, and Luke are what is known as the synoptic gospels, as you know. They all include a take on that. You know, they record his words and his language in slightly different ways. John, on the other hand, does not. The epistle of Yochanan or John does not include that discourse. And yet that was the same man who in 56 AD, not 95, wrote, and I can prove that, wrote the book of Revelation. So that the beginning of the book of Revelation is his take on 70 AD. Now, not all of it, but clearly it is. These things which will shortly come to pass, for the time is at hand. That's why people have to continue to try to push. You know, John was on Patmos in 95. And so they say, well, you know, he was also there in 56, and we can prove that. And the historical record also shows that he was aged in 96 to the point where he couldn't even walk. He barely said a few words. They had to carry him around. That was written in 56 AD in preparation for what happened in 70. Now, the book of Revelation goes on till now. But clearly, those first chapters, look, the child, the man-child that was born to rule the nations with a rod of iron, that happened. So Revelation is a part of what happened, and that is John's take on the Olivet Discourse, and that's why it wasn't included in the Gospel of John. So I hope that helps. I don't know. You know.
No, it's all good. I mean, like I said, I'm not really focused on preterism. I was focusing more on your statement, you know, because, you know, it's a term out there that they use, a phraseology in this state. I forgot who came up with it, but it states already, but not yet. Meaning in the spirit, it's already done, but it hasn't truly manifested itself yet. So, you know, that's the same thing with being born again. You can get the renewal of the mind, this and that, but even birth has a process where you have to push the baby out and spank it or do whatever, and to tell that it's alive. And okay, now you got a fully developed, functioning baby, you know, animated baby, not unanimated, but it's animated. Look, it's animated. So
yeah, let me just say something, man. That is a marvelous one that I use. I mean, we're on the same page. It's remarkable. You know, I was in a discussion, a dialogue in our Facebook group with Sarmadiel Ben Yehuda, and he was saying, well, you know, we're the kingdom of Yah, and he was saying we're the seed, and it grows and consumes the whole earth. So you're saying that a nation can be born in a day? You're saying that it's going to all happen at once? Doesn't have to start with that? And I told him, yes, a nation can be born in a day because it's written that. And who has understood these things? Can a nation come forth at once? But then I told him, you know, a birth happens all at once. Just like you said, a seed is planted. There's a process, but there comes a time when the nation comes forth. So he's saying the seeds were planted with Ben Ami in the kingdom of Yah. I'm saying it happened in the first century. But will the nation be born all at once? Yes. So I see your emphasis. And beyond the preterism, although I did want to speak to those who may be listening who are unclear on what that is concerning eschatology, because it's critical in the sense that some of us are in the first century. Some of us are now, meaning we're not gathered in the same space and time. In other words, if people are looking for those events, every time something happens, people expect, oh, Matthew 24 is fixing to happen. And really, it already did. So it changes where we are in time. And how can we unite if some of us are thinking that what happened in the first century has yet to happen, and some of us are thinking it already happened then? We're not even in the same year. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
I mean, and that's why I'm so glad that we talking and we touching bases on these things, because I believe all of this discourse need to come about. I don't know how much you focus on it for the nation building, the community building that you're doing, but it's a whole nother conversation out there. It's a whole nother understanding of theology and eschatology and stuff amongst quote unquote Hebrew Israelites or Israelites, the true church, the true Christians, right? And the world is not hearing it. You know, it was a big thing that happened last year with James White and the elder Ricard. and it really shook the fabric of the Hebrew Israelite community, and Christian apologists start popping up out of everywhere trying to chase Hebrew Israelites down and deal with them now. Like, oh, we seen y'all got a weakness in James White opening up this this opportunity for us. And so they need to hear more people outside of the paradigm that they've been seeing and hearing. So I'm glad this discourse is taking place, and we could have, you know, further discourse in the future that would deal with some of these things.
I agree. I see where it is you're going, and I am even now considering ways that we could work together to further the agendas of each of us. I see an opening here. I see a possibility, and I do need to get. My son needs me, and he's here, and I'm going to have to kind of cut this short. And
Well, I mean, it's all good. We just we letting the people know that you out there, and that this discourse can be had, and that, you know, things are taking place in 2017, this Gregorian calendar year, as it was called to happen, you know, and we haven't even really hit the new year. So the true new year. So I mean, if you gotta go, that's good. And as I was telling you, you know, I ain't been to Victorville in a while. So I mean, to make it back out to Victorville is like something that I need to do anyway. My brother and stuff, he moved away from Victorville, but he down closer to San Diego. I forget if he's in a little small spot or whatever, but you know, I got to get back out there and, you know, visit the West Coast. So, you know,
can you hear me right now?
yeah, I can hear you laughing.
Yeah, man. Look, we have a house, a 3,000 square foot house that we set up with the radio station and the whole thing. It's in the name of the church, or that's in process. And we have a spare room. And let's live for real. Come kick it with us whenever you can. We're working on it now. I'm working on the Mighty Hebrew. Come stay with us, man, for like a week or something. Let's kick it. Let's chop it up. Let's see what we can do. Try to combine efforts, So yeah, you were here. That's no coincidence. That's amazing. And so maybe we can hook that up where we can, you know, kind of get together out here and build. We can host you instead of staying at a hotel or a motel. Let's be Israel, man.
Yeah, we do that thing that Harry Rosenberg was talking about, that had the conscious community at our light. Oh, he could go anywhere in the world, and wherever there's a Jew, he got a place to lay his head. Wow, we need something like that. So that would be manifesting that in amongst us blacks.
Absolutely. But let me say, since you mentioned Harry Rosenberg, real quickly, the idea that we would agree to be characterized as the 10 northern tribes and not as Yehuda, Benjamin, and Levi, which is who we actually are, is a strategic mistake. I'm just going to have to say that. And so just a couple of days ago, Asherah, Ben Israel, and Malak Dawayad put up a video where they were in a meeting I guess it was in Dimona. And the Mona community is excited. They've agreed to this program where Harry Rosenberg is going to bring so-called African Americans from the United States who are quote unquote a part of the 10 lost tribes to work land and have no, we pay your college education, we'll feed you, we'll clothe you. This is modern day slavery. And so that issue has arisen. And I think that what we're doing now represents the real to that being counterfeit. I don't know the motives of Harry Rosenberg, but I do know that we are Judah, and I'm not going to build where the Jewish state is Judah and we're Israel, and we're going to join onto them like that to get into my own land where it's occupied by them, and they set that up, and I go there and work the land in the north as a tribe that is being uh, that's another issue, and maybe we can do a program on that. And I can't help but speak. He has spoken, and I can't stand idly by in the name of unity and not speak out against that because really it's not cool. And those two men were the only two men that uh, refused to accept that. Their report is that Demona was ecstatic. they were rejoicing. And so I'm troubled by that, to be frank with you. And I'm not going to.
Yeah, it's a lot of things to be troubled about. And when we get off air and we get a chance to talk to each other, you know, in the private, then we gonna talk about something, because it's a lot of stuff that's going on in the nation right now. And that's why I most definitely wanted to push the idea of Israelite nationalism. I've been pushing it before the Mighty Hebrew came out with the sovereign nationalism. And when he brought that out, I was like, wow, what is that? And the way he was explaining it, how it can help unite us, was like, yeah, okay, I'm feeling it, but we never really got to build and deal with it. And the merging of a Harry Rosenberg in the community, I talked with him. I still can get in discourse with him and some of his brethren and stuff. But it's a lot going on and took place last year that I know is bleeding into this year. But we gotta, you know, we gotta figure out how to deal with it, because, like I said, we haven't even really got into the new year, the true new year. So it's still, you know, stuff going on in this year, not this Gregorian calendar thing, but in this year, it's still stuff going on. So before the new year, hopefully we can have this stuff kind of, you know, dealt with and looked at in a more proper perspective. So I look forward to it.
I agree with you, and I think Pesach will see a shift in the nation at the new year, and certainly this is the 50th anniversary of the community at Demona, so there is a big jubilee, a celebration that goes there, and that really does mark the end of a season and the beginning of a new one in a unique way. So this Pesach should really be a critical kind of turning point for all of us, regardless as to our kind of theological orientations. And so, but I am so thankful for you, to you, for this invitation and this opportunity, and I really look forward to continuing the dialogue. Just like you said, off the air or on the air, I'm here for you, man, and I would like to promote your work on my station and vice versa. Let's network, let's build, let's demonstrate beyond our language and our words that we're serious about this thing, and that I am my brother's keeper, and I love you, and what's mine is yours. Let's take it to the next level. I think that's what this new year is about, and let's build in that direction and continue to see the deliverance that was prophesied come to our people. I mean, 400 years of this, I'm ready for a change. I'm fed up, and I want to see our people the head and not the tail, and above only, not beneath, as it is written.
And I'm with you. So we need some true hope, like they had all those patriarchs that came before us in Hebrews 11. And so we saved by hope, and you know, I'm still living in hope that I can see it in my time and not, you know, awake to it, but actually be here when it goes down. So with that said, I'm gonna say peace, brother, and I look to speak to you later. We got each other info, so let's keep in touch.
Absolutely. Peace. And to your audience, I say shalom aleichem, peace, shalom, shalom. And if I'm leaving anything out, forgive me. Shalom. Shalom. I love you all. Todah. Thank you.
All right, see y'all again, people. Peace.